This week I learned that hard work pays off and dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back with another weekly update. I hope everybody had a very safe St. Patty's Day. You know, I made the St. Patty's reference last week and kind of got laughed out of the bar. But, you know, we won't be worrying about that this week because, hey, that was the other day. So I hope your hangovers are going well, guys, if you still do indulge in those things. So, quite a week to talk about here. Some few unexpected things happened on the channel this week. We're going to kind of talk about them. But again, like we usually do, guys, with what am I reading. I told you last week I started Unsold. Well, I did finish that, obviously. This is a cup of coffee book, as I would call it, because it is very, very quick to read. I'll talk about it more here in a minute. But, yeah, lots of opinions about this one, but since I did do it in a review, I'll save it for that part. I'll wait for this week on the channel. I'll talk about it. But I did finish the big one here. This is To Green Angel Tower Part 1. I did finish it. And look, it's almost exactly the halfway point. It's almost. So that's pretty good. So I wasn't sure how close to halfway, because sometimes these things will be like, you know, Part 1 and 2 will be like 600 pages, and Part 3 and 4 will be like 400 pages. Maybe it's just Malazan. I don't know. But I did like it. I said that I felt like it was kind of a sucking my soul to live for some parts, because it's like, guys, it's just when you're reading a book that long, it feels like it's kind of dominating your life. It can, or whatever. But I don't want people thinking that means that I wasn't liking the book. I was, absolutely. I definitely like this Part 1 better than I liked Stone of Farewell. So I definitely like the way that things are going. There were some parts where I was like, hey, Ted, do you think maybe we could speed it up a little bit? But I expected that going to a story like this. It's definitely one of those where I'm like, okay, yeah, I think this probably could have been shorter, but it's never a part where I'm like, you could cut 2/3 of this out and feel like the same story like I felt with some other big books that I've read over the course of the last year. But I do like where it's headed. I do like that it was like somewhat cliffhangery between you know, book 2 and 3 in there, where it breaks Part 1 and Part 2 if you're doing it that way. But not so much I'm like, okay, well, I've got to pick up and keep going right now. No, we'll be doing that in a couple more weeks. April 1st is when the read-along will be concluding with To Green Angel Tower Part 2. So I'm very excited. It seems like most of the read-along is still together. Haven't had too many people drop out. There's some people behind, and there are some people who are still on Stone of Farewell. My wife is still on Stone of Farewell, but you know what? That's fine, guys. The content will always be there, and yeah, that thread will be up on the Discord. Anytime you want to kind of hop on and just kind of catch up with us, it will be there for you. About halfway through my review copy of Upgrade, I figured since I was going to be speaking with Blake Crouch on the channel in April, I thought maybe I'd probably go ahead and read his new book. And I'll say, guys, you know, I keep making the Michael Crichton comparison with Blake Crouch. I will say this is the most Michael Crichton book he's wrote yet. Yeah, like the science is oozing off of the page, you guys. I mean, you're literally like Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man being like, I'm something of a scientist myself while you're reading this, because there is so much science that you're just like flat out screaming she blinded me with science while reading it. But it's good, guys. That's the thing, is this guy has an uncanny ability like Mr. Crichton did to just be like, hey, here's some science for you, but you're never going to get bored. In fact, you're not going to be able to stop. It's had so many times in this already, about halfway here, where I've been like, okay, I'm going to stop at the end of this chapter, and then I'm already reading the next chapter and didn't realize it. So, yeah, it's a fast-paced, as always, guys. It has a very intriguing storyline. This one is dealing with gene editing. So, you know, we've had alternate timelines. We've had multiple realities. Now we're dealing with gene editing in a I want to say maybe a dystopian future. I don't really want to tell you too much about the story, but just say it's already not going where I expected it to. And Crouch is really good at keeping me on my toes with these things. So I'm excited to probably finish that sometime this week. I want to kind of finish both of those. Well, actually, I got to talk about the other one. Let's go ahead and talk about what I'm going to read. Now, obviously, I'm going to finish Upgrade. And I started working on Legends of the First Empire Book 3, it's Age of War, because I feel like these are pretty quick to read. Didn't get that far in it yet, but the plan is to try to finish that and Upgrade sometime over the next few days. That way I can start Kingdoms of Death with everybody else on the Discord once that starts. Now, the thing is with Kingdoms of Death is I already read like the first like 4 chapters, because I was just curious. You know, you got that review copy, you want to read it, but I still was like, you know what? everybody, just about everybody that I'm going to read along with that is they listen to it on audio, so they're going to fly through it a lot faster than I read. So I just got like, a 50-page head start on them. No big deal. But yeah, I do plan to start that sometime next week and be able to kind of be a part of the conversation there without being like, oh, just wait till you see what happens next. It's always fun to join those conversations. But that's really all I got planned for the next week or so. Like I said, a big release here, Kingdoms of Death, Sun Eater number 4. If you guys haven't read them yet, I do very much recommend that you do, because his book 5 is going to be coming out this fall. So 2 Sun Eater books coming this year. It's going to be an exciting time. Let's go ahead and move on to this week on the channel. I did my talk about nothing. I said I did end up moving that up this month because I knew there was going to be some things going on. And I just felt like, hey, why not? I already had Richard Nell on the schedule and said, hey, let's do it. This was the best time for us both to get together, but a very fun conversation. I think Richard is an author that I think we've been kind of like email pen pals for like the last year plus. And we just began the part where we were able to just talk so much that, hey, why don't we just do this? It'd be the first time I've had I guess I had Christopher Rocky on, but he's also a content creator on YouTube. So I tried to kind of stick with those as, just YouTube content creators. This is the first time I had one that is not. But Richard does want to start his own channel. So with that, it's just, I thought it would be a fun conversation to have, to not just talk about his books, but to talk about, everything else. And we did a little bit of everything else. A lot of conversation on there that I've never had with anyone else on the channel. Really a big focus on, being able to separate the art from the artist kind of thing. The whole idea of looking at things about when they were written and how you really can't look through that at the lens of today. If you can, you're just going to be upset, and that's just kind of something that I felt was a very good conversation. And that's kind of stuff, usually I'll stray away from on the channel too much. But I thought it was a good conversation to have. And I think we were both fair. And I haven't gotten too many people upset with that conversation yet. So, but anything, guys, check it out for his National Geographic collection. It's quite massive. What else? I talked Beowulf with Philip. This was something we've been talking about doing for a while. And actually, Philip shows off for the first minute of the video by speaking another language. As that's why you paid the admission to see Philip talk about Beowulf. But fun conversation, talk about just an absolutely legendary book. I mean, Beowulf is pretty much as influential to as to Tolkien as Tolkien was to all these other fantasy writers, because reading the translation by Mr. Tolkien, I think it made it a little more clear. I don't know if it was more of that or the fact that I was just at an age now more so than I was when I was 16 reading it, and you can understand things a little better. But a great conversation. Anytime I get to talk to Philip, it's always a learning experience. It's always a great time because he's such a great human being. I would just consider him a personal friend, and to be able to talk with him about something that I could tell he's clearly passionate about. I mean, he's read this book numerous times, and I'm pretty sure he can recite a lot of it by memory. But yeah, anytime I get to just pick his brain, it's a great time. And there's things that, like I said, I was scared, a little bit nervous, excitement in that conversation, because I was afraid I was going to be like, hey, what about when this happened? He's going to be like, yeah, that didn't actually happen. But apparently I did actually understand it well. And of course, he did bring up several things that I didn't quite catch, but made a lot of sense. So if you got 50 minutes, I would appreciate if you guys would check that out. Thing is, it doesn't matter if you've read the story or not. You've basically heard everything from Beowulf. If you haven't read it, don't worry about spoilers. It's not that kind of story, really. And I know that sounds weird. It's something that has been borrowed from and reproduced so many times. You've heard the story, you just don't know it yet. So I definitely would say read Beowulf if you got a chance. If not, hey, I think it's a fun conversation. And with Philip, you're always going to learn things. And that is why he is my favorite booktuber. I did my most recommended series. Now, what this is I felt like there was some confusion in the comments. What this was, my most recommended series by viewers, is stuff that viewers have recommended to me and I have not read yet, but I think within the next year plus, I will be starting these series. And it just turned into, hey, why not this series and why not this series? Because it hasn't been recommended. Look, I love to read Janny Wirtz. I love to read Old Man's War, things like that, guys. But they don't get recommended to me very much. So that video was more about what viewers have recommended to me the most. But some really cool conversations come up in that. And actually in that video, I did talk about a couple of the series that I was not going to be starting. And one of those was the Legend of Drizzt, the Forgotten Realms books. And I've actually kind of done a 180 on that now. And I'm actually considering the Dark Elf trilogy next time I have a quick little space in my schedule because those books look like they're very short. And from what I've been told, they're very much entry-level fantasy, so it's not like it requires a ton of brain power. But look, guys, if you had told me from day one that Dritz has an astral panther as an animal companion, I would have moved those books up years ago and would have already read them. So I'm excited to dip into all those series, obviously. Some will be happening sooner or later. I've already started Cradle, obviously, and that's a good point to talk about Cradle. I unveiled a new segment here called Rapid Reviews. It's just some books that I usually wouldn't review because I feel like I wouldn't be able to talk about them enough to do a whole 20-minute review on them. So Rapid Reviews is basically 10 minutes or less. So I know I got a lot of wisecracks about rapid review and it's still 10 minutes. Well, guys, my reviews are usually 20 minutes. So if you're talking about cutting my reviews in half, that's quite rapid to me, so I still consider it that. But yeah, those are always going to be 10 minutes or less. Some might be shorter going forward because I have to explain what rapid reviews are. So I'm thinking the sweet spot of that's going to be between 7 and 10 minutes, I think. And that gives me the opportunity to talk about some books that I usually wouldn't talk about because I don't feel like I could talk about them for my usual review format. But I think with that, it could be a lot of fun. And it gives me the opportunity to, if I want to get an extra video out every now and then, it's something that I could do. But as far as Cradle here, guys, I was mixed on Unsold. I couldn't quite see what it is everybody says is just so amazing about it. Now, I did admit I've never watched anime. I've only read a couple manga. And I know a lot of people say you kind of got to be well-versed in that to understand what it is that people like about that. Well, we'll see. I said my biggest concern was that this series was just going to be our characters grinding for XP and getting new power-ups every book. And I didn't know if that's something that I want to do 12 times. I'm a character-first guy, and this first book really struggled, I think, with its character work. But people have assured me in the comments that no, he does do that. And yes, he does explain, a lot of the questions that I had, things like that. And I said, if this is an in media res story, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that, going back to it and being like, I can see that this was all mapped out, planned out. He just didn't give you all the answers at first. I'm fine with that, guys. That's why I was just reviewing this book one. Now, I had a lot of warnings. The book 1 and 2 were just okay. And then, like Dresden Files, it takes off and it never lets back up. So we will find out. I don't know when I plan to read Soul Smith. But again, these books, these Cradle books are so small. I feel like anytime I've got like an extra day or two before I plan to start something, or I need a quick change of pace or something like that, something light, I think that's kind of be what I will go with. So no real schedule on the Cradle books, just kind of like I said, whenever I got time. But from what people tell me, once it really, really sinks its teeth into you, it doesn't let go, and you'll kind of speed run some of those later books. So if that's the case, hey, who knows? We might read them all this year. We shall see, guys. Let's talk about a little bit of next week plans here. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's tax season in my job, and things are really busy right now, so I have no idea. I have not planned ahead at all about what I'm going to do next week, except for one thing. One thing I planned ahead for is I'm going to go back into the multiverse, talk about Dolores Claiborne, since I did read it last week. I missed talking about Stephen King, obviously, where I recently did that tier list of, the first part of my ranking Stephen King. And so I said, hey, cool, I can actually go back into the multiverse and talk some Stephen King with Dolores Claiborne. One of those kind of stories I feel like kind of goes under the radar with King, but is very, very good. And I think I have plenty to say about Dolores because she's something. She's definitely something. So plenty to talk about with that story. And I can't wait to do it. Outside of that, guys, like I said, I don't know. Maybe a quick hit, talk about maybe my Lord of the Rings plans I got coming up for the channel. I did say when that TV series comes out, I did plan to put all my Lord of the Rings content out. That's going to happen. Maybe I'll give an explanation of that. Maybe do my off the books. I don't really know. I'm kind of due for an off the books. I know the last one I did was kind of controversial for some weird reason. I don't know why. Because it actually, I look at that video and it lost me a ton of subscribers. So weird. I don't know. People don't like Dodge Challengers, I guess. I don't know. With me, but off the books, guys, is always, like I said, it's just kind of a peek behind the curtain of other things I like in life besides books, because there are plenty of things. I don't know. I kind of almost feel like I'd like to do something about music in that one. I know the only music one I've done on this channel has been when I talked about Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters. And yeah, there wasn't very much interest for that. But like I said, the growth on the channel is really coming to a screeching to a halt now. So I think right now would be the perfect time to talk about something that, may not be popular with the masses, but something that's kind of that I want to do to just kind of get it out of me. I haven't really talked about a lot of rock music that I like yet. Maybe that would be a good opportunity to do it. I don't know. There's lots of things. Maybe I could talk about the Monday Night Wars. I think that there's plenty of room to talk about that now, right? But let's go ahead and talk about some TV and movie talk before I go, guys. Now, I got to start this off with something sad here. Obviously, if you had any idea what I was talking about in the cold open there, very big wrestling fan back in the day. I grew up in Atlanta, which was about, 6 miles from the Omni, which is where they did all of the WCW events back when WCW was a thing. And so I was always like, I loved WWF just like every kid did growing up in that time period. All those Gen Xers were all about it. But I also always had a soft spot for WCW just because, like I said, it was my backyard, and I went and saw Sting and Ric Flair wrestle for 60-minute Iron Man matches. It was great. So I was probably one of the only people in the early 90s still watching wrestling on a weekly basis because it was just something that I had grown up with, and I never quite grew out of it. I wasn't quite as into it as I once was, but I remember it was in 1996. I was just doing my homework, and I had wrestling on the background, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, Scott Hall just walked in. Scott Hall just showed up on WCW. At the time, I was like, it's Razor Ramon, right? Well, this was just the beginning of what became, known as the Monday Night Wars in WCW. And Scott Hall really was the one who kicked it off. And we sadly lost Scott Hall this week. And why this is just such a drag to me is because, we've lost a lot of wrestlers over the past few years. With Scott Hall, it's like, this is something that we expected to happen a while back. I mean, the guy his life was a mess, and he's one of those, like Jake the Snake, that got with Diamond Dallas Page, really got his life cleaned up. If you have a chance, watch that documentary, The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. Scott Hall is greatly featured in it. DDP saved his life, basically. And this guy had gotten his life back on track. He had been sober for like 8 years now. Everything was finally working for him. And for him to go out like this, complications from surgery, is just so heartbreaking. It's just such a drag that's what did this. He made it through his darkest hour and got through it, and to lose him that way, it's just terrible. It's just terrible. But what those guys meant, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, what those guys meant to the business, they changed wrestling, guys. I mean, it was dwindling to where it was like I said, I was one of the few people watching it, and the fact that those guys took that into just the huge popularity that it hit, and the way that they changed the business is not just that, but you realize that wrestlers didn't have guaranteed contracts before them. They were the ones who kind of pioneered that. Back then, you could break your neck in the ring, they release you and be like, peace. You didn't have to pay their medical bills. He was one that got them guaranteed deals, got them medical coverage, stuff like that. Those guys were pioneers behind the scenes as well as they were on camera. So I'll always have nothing but respect for those two, and Scott Hall especially, because like I said, I just will never remember his "you guys won a war, you got one" speech that just kind of changed everything there in the 90s. And it's just so heartbreaking when you lose a legend like that. So I want to kind of put a spotlight on that. Guys, look, the whole thing with the Monday Night Wars, I could do a whole off the books on that, okay? I was, all about it. I mean, it was so addictive back in the days, guys, that we would have 2 TVs hooked up and playing both, Raw on one TV and Nitro on the other, because it was just such a great, great time to be alive. And I will always be for life, NWO forever. So, guys, there are a couple other things here before I go. I do want to talk about these reviews for the Halo TV show that's coming out. What a shock. It doesn't look like it's going to be Halo. From everything I've been reading, and the rollout up to this is just basically has flat out admitted, yeah, we didn't follow the games at all. We're changing Master Chief. We're going to show the show through the eyes of a human character. Because, no one who's going to be watching that show has any interest in Master Chief, right? I mean, this just feels like, hey, we got Luke Skywalker back, but he's not going to be the focus of the movie. And that's what this feels like right now. So, look, it could turn out to be decent. I don't know, but the reviews have not been kind. And I want to say, okay, well, maybe they're just trying to capture, general audiences. Because, look, you don't have general audiences, you don't have a show. But here's the thing is, you don't have to lose your established fandom to do that. You've already decreased your value if you lose your established fandom. Before the show, even just the rollout of this has been just terrible, just handled terribly. So I don't know. Like I said a few weeks back, guys, when I said that they're going to be on their 3rd showrunner before season 2 even starts filming. that's red flags. So my hopes are not high for that series, and it just seems like a shame. It seems like a shame. It seems like every single person who gets their hands on one of these popular IPs, they just have no idea what they're doing. I'm like, how do we keep getting so many people with these big IPs that have no clue what they're doing? It's not that hard to find someone. You don't have to do a page-for-page adaptation. I don't need to see an adaptation of the video game beat by beat. I have the video game if I want to do that. But, you can make it recognizable, And it's already they're already talking about that Gears of War when they're like, yeah, but we're not going to follow the games all. Then why do it? If you have an original story to tell your original story. You don't have to use this stuff just for brand recognition. I understand why they're doing it. I'm just telling them it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and they're going to end up blaming the fans. And I don't know how many times we've got to see this movie before it finally sinks in that this is not the way. But they're $1 million, companies and stuff, and I'm just a dude with Wi-Fi. So what do I know? Last, before I go, guys, I'll talk about movie week with my kid. We watched Armageddon from the late 90s there. The Bruce Willis movie, which was almost like a vehicle for more Aerosmith songs, which I was all about. That was like the second renaissance for Aerosmith there in the 90s. They were huge again. They were as big as they had been since like the 70s and 80s. So I think it was the third renaissance, wasn't it? Because they were out in the 70s, and another off the books I could do. They were big in the 70s. They disappeared, came back in the 80s, and kind of low key disappeared. And then in the 90s they just blew up again. But Aerosmith, that's a hell of a band to talk about. But as far as Armageddon, is every time I see that movie, I expect to be like, there's probably some nostalgia there, and this movie's just going to be just terrible. Look, I don't know if it is the nostalgia, but I have a blast every time I watch that movie. It's one of those where it's Michael Bay before he became Michael Bay, because it's at least still watchable. Has an incredible cast. You really go back and look at that cast. It's just insane how good that cast is. But my kid loved it, obviously. I mean, he just thought it was the best. So, I will admit that, look, this isn't a movie that's got writing that's going to win Emmys or anything like that. Oscars, I guess Emmys is TV, right? Oscars is movies. Not everything has to be an Oscar winner. Not everything has to go for the Golden Globe. Sometimes it's okay to just watch a popcorn flick. At least I think so, especially when you're sharing it with your kids. But it just amazes me about that movie is that I always feel like, oh yeah, this is going to be the time I watch it and think, oh God, how did I ever like this? And I don't. Every time I watch it, I have just such a great time with it. So I think it's worth revisiting if you haven't. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't watched it yet, I think a lot of it still actually holds up. It's ridiculous. If you want hard science, guys, no, watch Deep Impact. That was the one that was closer to realism. This one was very much the arcade game, and I'm thankful for it. It was good. It had a lot of fun, and I'm quite happy with how it's aged. I would watch it again, and I think that's always kind of the barometer there. But of course, if you got young kids, they're going to love it. Yes, definitely show it to them. And guys, that's really kind of all I got this week. And I do have, like I said, tax time is really rough. So it's going to be a rough week here going forward. So I might be a little more incognito in the comments than usual. But I'll try to catch up with all those. I haven't even gotten to the comments in that Beowulf video yet. So I'll catch up with that, and I will talk to you guys there. So drop in the comments below. Let me know what you are up to. What are you reading? What are you watching? What do you listen to? What are you playing? Were you a NWO like myself? Give me some of this, guys, and I will talk to you in the comments.